Hi guys, welcome back to the Academy of Historical Fencing. I'm Nick Thomas and reviewing today the GoNow.pl foam training sabres, and this is the one they call the heavy version. The difference is actual length, which does affect the weight, but it is the length is the issue. So the lightweight is a short one, which is like a hanger or a cutlass size, and this is the heavy, which is good for what we do for British military sabre and various sort of infantry sabres, and to some degree even cavalry sabres. Right, I have occasionally put videos up using these, and it's usually because we've done stuff with no fencing masks. Now that is something I'd only recommend for advanced students and people who appreciate the risks and don't mind taking them. So don't do that as a normal thing. There is obviously a good chance they can hit quite hard onto the top of the head, but in terms of nose and teeth, eye damage and stuff like that, there are risks there, so don't do that as a normal practice. But it is an interesting thing for more advanced people to do, because it certainly teaches you to look after your head more than normal. What do I think of them, and why do we use them in the club, and how do we use them in the club? Because after all, we've got some really great training swords, especially the Black Fencer. We've now got some really good training sabres. So why would we use these foam sabres? Because we still do use them. In fact, this is a brand new one that arrived today because I just got a few new ones in. Few things. One, we use them as a beginner's training tool because theoretically you should be able to do all your drills without a fencing mask, but accidents can happen, and it would only take one to be catastrophic. So when people are drilling, masks on, and if they're newbies that don't have masks, then they can drill with these. And it's low intensity anyway, but this just means that they're not going to hurt each other, because they are, really thick, if you like. They've got a really big tip on them, so you've got, a lot less chance of doing any kind of injury. They are very, very safe, as safe as these things can be. So, we use them for beginners as a drilling tool, and then we use them for some sparring, especially when we want to use them for just a bit of fun, because they're a bit different, because you can spar without all the training gear on. Also when it's particularly hot in the summer, so we were at an event in the summer that was outdoors and it was baking hot, and we fought with these throughout the day because it was just sweltering. So there's some good uses for them. They haven't replaced anything else that we use in the club by any means, synthetics and steels and stuff like that. This is an additional item. Now, what it actually is then is it's a plastic core with foam over the top, and then this outer sort of polyester type material to cover it. And the guard is then plastic with foam padded sort of liner in it. So basically all plastics, foams and synthetic fabrics, stuff like that. And what that means is it hits quite lightly. Now, don't think it hits like a child's toy. It can still deliver a good whack, but aside from getting hit on the head without a mask on, it's really very light. The only thing I would say is you've got no flex, so go easy on the thrusts. But in terms of a cutting weapon, very, very safe, because it's very broad edges, transmitting the energy over a very wide area, and it's so cushiony because of all that padding. Right, so how does it really compare to what we're doing? Well, funnily enough, it is actually really quite accurate in many ways for British military sabre. So, of the Napoleonic era, I mean. So this is a good example. This is an 1803 pattern British infantry officer's sword, and if you look at the two side by side, they are very similar in overall size and curvature. And the guards, of course, it's a little bit larger, of course, but it does represent, that small slotted hilt quite well, even though it's a bit oversized. And the overall specs even do come in within historical range. So it's 580 grams total weight, with a balance of 14 centimetres and a blade length of 78 centimetres. Now those specs do put it within a historical range for a British infantry sabre. The low end of the weight, but it's within, and the balance and length very, very typical. So that example I just showed you, that's 1 centimetre shorter than this on the blade length. It's 760 grams and balance of 12.5 centimetres. But they vary an awful lot. So yeah, it does actually represent a British Napoleonic era infantry sabre very well, surprisingly well. For what it is. And you've even got some cant on the grip, which is really nice. So cant is where the grip, the whole sort of grip section tilts in the opposite direction to the curvature of the blade, which, when you've got a very curved blade like this, really helps get the point on line for both cutting and thrusting. So that's really nice, and something that even steel reproductions don't tend to do. So that is quite nice. So there you go, it does represent these swords that we'll go training with very well. The ball gives a nice bit of protection, so you can just spar with these without any gloves. The only caveat being, if you do it for quite a long time and your hands get very sweaty, then it starts to rub and it'll just wear down and blister your hands. But if for 1 or 2 fights, you're not going to have a problem with it. But yeah, if you do repeated fights, a simple leather glove will stop that chafing, so that's fine. The grips are comfortable, they do grip well, there's plenty of space for anyone's size hands, and with a glove on if you need to do that. Right, so what else is there to say about them? They're cheap, they come out just under £30. You can buy them from all different suppliers, Night Shop, HEMA Shop, they sell it, well they're the same company. Spez sell them, and Black Armory do with their own stamped up version of it. So there are a lot of companies that sell them, so they're easy to get, just under £30, which is a bit of a bargain. In terms of durability, the first generation that we had were a lot thinner on the blade and a lot weaker, and the core was weaker, so we did go through those and we did break them all in the end. But this generation, which has been around for, I don't know, maybe a year now, something like that, this generation, so all the current stocks of this one, is heavier and stronger, and we haven't managed to break any of them, so they've really upped that. The only other thing I'll say about durability is, if you use these with fencing masks on, is the fencing masks are obviously like a grater, if you like, on this kind of material. So it will take nicks and burrs out of this outer fabric. Again, it'll take a long time to be much of a problem. And when it does happen, just get some black gaffer tape and just patch it over and keep going. So they should go on for quite some time, as much as any training sword really you'd expect to go for. So they're cheap, they do represent the sword quite well. They do look pretty decent now as well, which I'm quite impressed with. And they're a really fun training tool, especially when it's hot outside, you just want to get that gear off, or a stuffy sort of summer indoors. So they really do have some good applications, I would say. So I do highly recommend them, there's no doubt about it. And the sort of caveat I have to put in with that is, if they were all that you ever used, they would teach you some awful habits, because they do encourage a real swinging style. And that would not be a good thing. If you train with some decent synthetics and steels, and you add these in as an extra, absolutely fantastic. Or if you're a beginner and you need something cheap and safe to get started with, and you're going to progress fairly quickly onto other things as well, also a good idea. So they are really, really useful, just not in isolation, because that will teach you to fight in a very different way than the manuals that we work from would teach. So do bear that in mind, and obviously you've got to go a bit easier on the thrusts than you necessarily would, but I guarantee you, if you spar with these, you're going to find yourself doing a lot more cutting than you would thrusting anyway. They just do encourage it. So also in terms of how they meet each other on the bind, obviously they're padded, so how does that work? Surprisingly well, actually. There's not much bounce in them, and because of that cushioning, they do kind of stop on one another in a reasonable fashion. So as much as you could hope for, they do bind and engage fairly well. So yeah, an excellent training tool. It does represent the kind of swords that we practice quite well. It's nice and safe to use, it's great in hot weather, and so great to be able to just strip all the gear off, all the actual protective gear, and leave a mask on or off depending on your level, and go at it without all that stuff on. So that's really, really nice as well. So yeah, I do really highly recommend them as an extra training tool, or to some degree a beginner's training tool. But I'd recommend everybody have a go with them. They're a lot of fun and a really useful training tool that will give you a new perspective on combat if you're used to only training in all the gear. So yeah, highly recommended, particularly if you do British military sabre of the Napoleonic period. Get one, have some fun. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do so.